My husband is so naive. Melissa laughed into her phone, her voice dripping with arrogance. He still thinks he's the biological father of our son. My ex is the real dad. What she didn't know was that her husband, Ryan, stood behind the door, phone in hand, recording every word that would shatter their perfect little world. Viewers, imagine discovering that the child you've loved and raised for 6 years was never yours, and hearing it from the woman who vowed to love you forever. What would you do in that moment? Forgive her, or destroy everything built on her lie? Tell me in the comments. That question lingered like smoke over the suburban night sky of Brookstone Hills, a neighborhood that looked perfect from the outside. Neatly mowed lawns, polished mailboxes, and houses that whispered of harmony. But behind one of those closed doors, a storm was brewing. Ryan Brooks believed he had everything a man could want. A loyal wife, Melissa, a bright, talkative 6-year-old son, Jacob, and a peaceful home he'd built with years of hard work. At 34, Ryan's life looked like a commercial for the American dream. He worked as a project supervisor for a construction firm downtown, the kind of man who kissed his wife goodbye every morning and returned each evening to the sound of laughter spilling from the kitchen. But lately, something about that laughter felt different. Melissa had become distant, hiding behind her phone, lowering her voice when she spoke. Her smiles had grown sharper, her gaze heavier with something Ryan couldn't name. He noticed small things, a deleted message thread, her frequent girls' nights out, the secretive way she handled calls when Jacob wasn't around. Still, Ryan brushed it off. Love, after all, is built on trust. Until that night. It was a quiet Thursday evening. Ryan came home earlier than usual, the faint sound of rain tapping against the windows. The house smelled of lavender candles and freshly cooked pasta. He placed his briefcase by the door and was about to call out to Melissa when he heard her voice. From the living room, soft at first, then laughter. He froze. Melissa's tone was playful, casual, and then the words came. "My husband is so naive," she said, chuckling over the phone. "He doesn't know that he's not the biological father of our son. My ex is the real father." Ryan's blood ran cold. His pulse thundered in his ears as the words settled like knives in his chest. He stepped closer, barely breathing, his phone trembling in his hand. Some part of him refused to believe it, but another part whispered that he had always known. In that moment, Ryan did something unexpected. He didn't barge in. He didn't yell. Instead, he opened his camera app, pressed record, and captured every word. Her laughter echoed through the speakers as his world silently shattered. He stood there for a long time, motionless, hollow, a man watching his reality collapse in slow motion. The rain outside grew heavier as though the heavens themselves were mourning the death of his trust. And yet, beneath the pain, something fierce began to stir inside him. Something that whispered, "Don't break. Plan." Ryan stood frozen behind the slightly open door, his mind refusing to accept what his ears had just heard. The voice he once adored had turned into something venomous. Every laugh, every word, every careless sentence slicing through him like glass. Melissa's laughter continued, unaware that her husband, her so-called naive fool, was just a few feet away, recording her betrayal. "Can you imagine?" she said through the phone. 6 years and he still thinks Jacob is his. My ex didn't want the baby, but Ryan was so desperate to be a father. He practically begged for a family. It was perfect. Ryan's hand clenched into a fist. His jaw tightened. His breath grew shallow, almost non-existent. Perfect. The word echoed in his mind like a curse. When the call finally ended, Melissa stretched on the couch, humming lightly, scrolling through her phone as though she hadn't just detonated a bomb in her marriage. Ryan's body felt disconnected from his soul as he stepped out from the shadows, his phone still recording. "Melissa," he said quietly. Her head jerked up, startled. "Ryan, you scared me. I didn't hear you come in." His expression was calm, too calm. "I noticed. Who were you talking to?" She hesitated, a flicker of guilt flashing across her face before she forced a smile. Just Laura. You know how she is, always gossiping. He nodded slowly. Gossiping about what? Me? Her smile faltered. What? No, of course not. Ryan pressed the play button on his phone. Her own voice filled the room. Crisp, undeniable, cruel. My husband is so naive. He doesn't even know he's not the biological father of our son. Melissa froze. The color drained from her face as she stumbled backward, her lips trembling. Ryan, wait. This isn't what it sounds like. Then tell me what it is, he said, his voice low but controlled, like a man holding back a storm. Tell me how long you've been lying to me. Tell me why you let me raise another man's child for 6 years. She started to cry, her hands trembling. Ryan, please, listen. It was before you and I got married. It was one mistake. I didn't think it mattered because you loved Jacob like your own. He interrupted sharply. Because I thought he was my own. Silence. Only the ticking clock dared to move. Ryan looked at her, eyes burning with disbelief and heartbreak. You lied every single day, every birthday, every bedtime story, every hug. I lived in a lie you built. Tears streamed down Melissa's face as she tried to reach him. Please don't do this. Don't throw everything away. Jacob needs you. Pack your things, Ryan said, his tone final, cold, unwavering, and take your son with you. Her eyes widened. Ryan, please, not tonight. It's late. He's asleep. He turned away, staring at the window where rain smeared the city lights into a blur of gold and gray. Then wake him, he said quietly. Because after tonight, neither of you will live under this roof again. The rain had turned into a downpour, its rhythm pounding against the windows like a drumbeat to the chaos inside the Brooks household. Melissa stood in the living room, trembling, clutching her phone as if it could save her. Ryan leaned against the wall, expression unreadable, his chest rising and falling in slow, measured breaths. The weight of 6 years pressed on him like a mountain. Ryan, she whispered, her voice cracked from crying. Please don't do this. I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you. But think about Jacob. He loves you. You're the only father he's ever known. Ryan closed his eyes for a moment. Her words dug deep. The image of Jacob, his small hands clutching a baseball glove, the sound of his laughter in the park, the way he'd run into his arms after school, stabbed at the part of him that still wanted to protect his little boy. But then he remembered Melissa's voice from that phone call, dripping with mockery. My husband is so naive. Every ounce of mercy inside him turned to stone. I can't unhear what you said, he replied, his tone cold and deliberate. You didn't just betray me, Melissa. You humiliated me. You robbed me of the one thing I believed was pure. I didn't mean it that way. You meant every word, he snapped, his control slipping for the first time. You laughed while saying it. You made me the punchline of your lie. Melissa broke down, falling to her knees, sobbing into her palms. Ryan, I was scared. I didn't know how to tell you. It was one mistake and I was ashamed. You were so happy when you thought Jacob was yours. I didn't want to destroy that. Then you destroyed me instead, Ryan said. The words hit her like a slap. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air felt thick, every second dragging like a lifetime. Finally, Ryan stepped forward, his voice lower now, steadier but full of finality. You have 1 hour. Pack your things and leave. Take Jacob with you. Don't make this harder than it already is. Melissa looked up at him. Her mascara streaked, her heart visibly shattering. Where am I supposed to go? It's pouring outside. He's sleeping. Please, Ryan. At least wait until morning. He stared at her for a long moment, his jaw trembling as if he might relent. But then he turned his back. I don't care where you go, just not here, not anymore. Melissa rose shakily to her feet. She walked toward the stairs, her sobs echoing in the silence. Moments later, Ryan heard her waking Jacob, her voice soft, trembling, full of guilt. Through the rain-streaked window, he watched as she came down with a small suitcase and a sleepy child in her arms. Jacob's eyes, half closed, blinked at his father. "Daddy, where are we going?" Ryan's throat tightened. He couldn't speak. He just nodded once, stiff, broken. Melissa hesitated at the door, searching his face for any trace of mercy, but Ryan's gaze was distant, buried somewhere beyond forgiveness. She stepped out into the rain, and the door closed behind her with a hollow, echoing click. And just like that, the perfect illusion of the Brooks family shattered into the night. The morning light crept slowly into the house, pale and uncertain, as if even the sun hesitated to touch what had been broken the night before. Ryan sat at the kitchen table, still in the same clothes he'd worn when Melissa left. His coffee had gone cold. The house, once filled with the sound of Jacob's cartoons and Melissa's soft singing, was now haunted by silence. Every corner felt heavier. Every photo frame on the wall looked like a lie. The clock on the wall ticked mercilessly. 7:03 a.m. Ryan's phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from Melissa, 2 unread messages. He didn't open them. He didn't have to. There was nothing she could say that would undo what he'd heard. He looked around the kitchen, the breakfast dishes from last night still stacked by the sink, Jacob's toy car lying on the floor, Melissa's scarf draped over the chair. Everything was frozen in time, evidence of a family that no longer existed. A part of him wanted to drive to where she'd gone, to see Jacob again, to hold his son. But then came the other voice, the one that reminded him that Jacob wasn't truly his. That truth burned like acid. For 6 years he'd given his heart to a child who wasn't his blood. He'd worked overtime to provide, sacrificed weekends, built memories that had now been stripped of their meaning. Every bedtime story, every scraped knee, every "I love you, Dad," replayed in his mind until it crushed him. But even through the pain, a deeper truth emerged. He didn't regret loving Jacob. What he regretted was believing in a woman who had played God with his trust. He reached for his phone, not to call Melissa, but to open his voice recording. Her laughter filled the room again. "My husband is so naive." He stopped the playback midway, staring blankly at the wall. "Not anymore," he muttered. That was the moment Ryan Brooks, the naive husband, died. He picked up his car keys and drove through the gray morning to his lawyer's office downtown. The air outside smelled of wet asphalt and finality. As he parked, he looked at the reflection of his face in the rearview mirror. He didn't recognize the man staring back, eyes sunken, jaw set like iron. Inside the law firm, everything was sterile and quiet. The receptionist looked up with a polite smile. "Good morning, sir. Do you have an appointment?" "No," Ryan said, his voice steady for the first time in hours. "But I need to file for divorce." The words came out heavy, but liberating. As he filled out the paperwork, each signature felt like a wound closing. Painful, but necessary. He attached the voice recording as evidence, saved a digital copy, and sat there staring at his name on the document. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like survival. Outside, the rain had stopped, but inside, Ryan knew this was only the calm before the next storm, because Melissa wasn't going to walk away quietly. She was going to fight, and she was going to try to take him down with her. Melissa did not take long to retaliate. 3 days after Ryan filed for divorce, a letter arrived. A thick white envelope with her lawyer's name stamped in bold at the top. Inside, buried beneath formal language, was her counterattack. She was demanding full custody of Jacob, spousal support, and child support payments. Ryan read the letter twice. His jaw tightened with each line. Melissa was still playing the same game, twisting truth into a weapon. That night he called his attorney, a calm, sharp woman named Evelyn Clark. She had handled enough messy divorces to know when a client was fueled by anger. But Ryan wasn't angry anymore. He was resolute. "She's claiming Jacob is your son, Evelyn said, scanning the papers. If that's the case, she can push for child support. Are you prepared to contest paternity? Ryan hesitated. The thought of having to prove Jacob wasn't his was a pain deeper than he'd ever known. But there was no other way. Yes, he said quietly. Do the test. When Evelyn arranged the DNA test, the nurse at the clinic smiled at Jacob, who sat nervously on the chair. Ryan's heart broke watching him, the boy's innocent face, his trust, his small fingers clinging to his sleeve. He wanted to tell him everything and nothing at once. Hey, buddy, Ryan said softly. This is just something we have to do, okay? Jacob nodded, unaware of the truth behind his father's trembling smile. The results came a week later. Ryan didn't need to read the percentages. The headline said it all. Probability of paternity, 0%. He sat in silence for a long time, the letter in his hands. There it was, the scientific proof that his world had been built on a lie. 2 weeks later, they faced each other in court. Melissa arrived in a navy blue suit, her hair perfectly done, her expression polished with feigned composure. Ryan sat across from her, calm, his evidence neatly organized in a folder. When Melissa's attorney painted her as the victim, a fragile woman abandoned by her husband, Ryan said nothing. He waited. Then Evelyn stood. Your Honor, she said firmly, we have an audio recording that changes everything. The courtroom fell silent. As Melissa's voice filled the speakers, laughing, mocking, confessing, her mask cracked. She looked at Ryan with wide, panicked eyes, the same eyes that had once held affection. When the recording ended, the judge leaned forward. Mrs. Brooks, is that your voice? Melissa swallowed hard. Yes, Your Honor, but... There are no buts here, the judge interrupted sharply. You knowingly deceived your husband about the child's paternity for 6 years. Mr. Brooks bears no legal or financial responsibility for your son. The gavel came down. In that instant, Ryan felt something lift off his shoulders, the invisible weight of lies, guilt, and humiliation. Melissa, on the other hand, sat frozen, her perfect posture collapsing under the truth. Outside the courthouse, the press waited. Ryan ignored the flashing cameras. He wasn't a man looking for revenge. He was a man reclaiming his peace. But for Melissa, the storm was only beginning. The verdict echoed in Melissa's mind long after she left the courthouse. Mr. Brooks bears no legal or financial responsibility for your son. Those words replayed again and again, each time sounding heavier, crueler. Outside, the sky was gray, and the wind whipped her hair across her face. She clutched her coat tighter, not because of the cold, but because of the shame that burned beneath her skin. The world she had carefully constructed, the image of the perfect wife, the loving mother, the envied suburban woman, crumbled overnight. News traveled fast. Her friends, once eager to gossip with her over brunch, stopped answering her calls. One by one, they vanished. The whispers started at the local cafe where she used to meet them. That's her, someone murmured. She lied to her husband for 6 years. Another added, used him for money, can you imagine? Melissa pretended not to hear, but their eyes followed her everywhere, eyes filled with judgment, disgust, pity. She couldn't walk through the grocery store without feeling them burn into her back. Even her ex, the biological father of Jacob, a man named Sean, wanted nothing to do with her. Melissa, he said over the phone, his voice cold. Don't call me again. I told you before I didn't want a child then, and I don't want one now. You made your choice. Live with it. The line went dead. That night, Melissa sat alone in the small apartment she'd rented with what little savings she had left. The walls were thin, the heater barely worked, and Jacob slept fitfully on the couch, unaware of the full truth. She stared at the empty wine glass on the table, her mind spinning between guilt and rage. He humiliated me, she whispered to herself. He made me look like a monster. But even as she said it, she knew the truth. Ryan hadn't destroyed her. She had done that herself. She opened her phone, scrolling through old photos of their family. Ryan teaching Jacob to ride a bike. The three of them smiling at a picnic. The Christmas mornings filled with laughter. Each image felt like a mirror showing her what she'd lost. There was no undoing it. No redemption waiting on the horizon. Jacob stirred on the couch. "Mom," he mumbled. "When are we going home?" Melissa froze, her throat tightening. We are home now, sweetheart." He frowned, confusion clouding his small face. "But where's Dad?" Tears welled up in her eyes. She turned away so he wouldn't see. "He's busy," she whispered. "He's not coming tonight." Later, when Jacob fell back asleep, Melissa sat by the window staring out at the city lights she could no longer reach. In the reflection, she barely recognized herself. Hollow eyes, trembling lips. A woman stripped of every illusion. The truth had taken everything from her, her comfort, her pride, her place in the world. And yet, beneath the ruins, one thought refused to die. Maybe one day, he'll forgive me. But Ryan Brooks had already moved on from forgiveness. He was learning how to rebuild from truth, not lies. The weeks after the court ruling passed like a quiet storm. The house felt different now, emptier yet strangely peaceful. The same walls that once trapped Ryan in the echo of lies now stood as proof of survival. He didn't sell it. He refused to. That house was no longer a symbol of deception. It was his, and he would reclaim it, not for the past, but for himself. Each morning, the same sunlight spilled through the kitchen window where Melissa once stood, but now it touched only him. The silence that had once mocked him began to feel sacred, like the sound of healing. He didn't hear from Melissa again. No calls, no messages, no attempts at reconciliation. She had vanished completely, and Ryan didn't seek her out. He'd already wasted enough of his life on a woman who saw his love as a weakness. Instead, he focused on rebuilding, not just his routine, but his spirit. He started waking early, running through the quiet streets before dawn, letting the cool air clear his thoughts. He went back to work and poured his energy into projects that had long sat unfinished. His team noticed the shift. "You're different, Ryan," one coworker said one afternoon. "More focused, like you've let go of something heavy." He simply smiled. "Maybe I finally did." In the evenings, he would return home, light a small lamp, and sit on the porch with a cup of coffee. From there, he'd watch the neighborhood, the kids playing, the couples walking hand in hand, and he felt no bitterness, only calm detachment. The pain that once gripped his chest had turned into quiet understanding. He kept Jacob's drawings in a box in his study. Sometimes he'd open it just to look. He didn't cry anymore. He didn't rage. He just smiled faintly, remembering the boy who had once called him Dad. The love had been real, even if the truth wasn't. In a way, that realization became his peace. Love didn't always need to be repaid to matter. Sometimes it simply existed, pure and unreciprocated, leaving its mark before moving on. One Saturday afternoon, while repairing a broken section of the backyard fence, Ryan met his new neighbor, a woman named Claire. She had recently moved in next door, a teacher with a warm laugh and an easy smile. Their first conversation was short, but genuine. Two people who understood the quiet language of healing. Over the next few weeks, they would exchange small talk across the lawn. Simple things, ordinary moments, but those were the moments Ryan had once taken for granted. He no longer looked for perfection. He looked for peace. And in that quiet house that had once been filled with lies, peace finally lived again. Ryan had learned that truth didn't destroy him. It freed him. The man who once believed his life had ended now understood something deeper. Sometimes losing everything false is the only way to gain something real. Seasons changed, but Ryan's peace remained. The storms that once ruled his heart had quieted, replaced by a calm acceptance that felt almost sacred. There were days when he still walked past the framed family photos tucked in his hallway closet. He didn't remove them. He simply left them there, sealed away like a finished chapter. He had no urge to destroy or revisit them. What was done was done. Melissa never came back. Not a call, not a letter, not even a whisper through mutual friends. She disappeared as if swallowed by her own choices. And Ryan never looked for her. He didn't need closure from her. He'd already found it within himself. The house, once a place of betrayal, had become his sanctuary. He had repainted the walls a calm shade of gray, changed the furniture, replaced the bedsheets, and planted a small garden out back. Every flower that bloomed felt like a quiet triumph over pain. He often spent weekends there tending to the soil. There was something profoundly therapeutic about it, seeing life rise from the same earth that once felt barren. His neighbor, Claire, would often wave from her yard. They'd talk about little things, her students, his work, the weather. She never pried into his past, and he never offered it. Their friendship grew naturally, unforced, steady. Sometimes she'd bring over a plate of homemade cookies or help him water the plants. Other times they'd simply share the silence. It was in those quiet moments that Ryan understood something he never had before. Peace isn't found in forgetting. It's found in accepting. He'd accepted everything. The betrayal, the heartbreak, even the loss of the boy he'd once called his son. He didn't need revenge, nor did he need remorse from the woman who wronged him. He just needed truth. And truth had set him free. One crisp autumn evening, Ryan sat on his porch watching the sunset spill gold across the street. Claire joined him, handing him a cup of tea. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said softly. He nodded. "Yeah. I used to think peace meant having everything I wanted. Now I know it's just being okay with what is." She smiled gently, and for the first time, Ryan felt something warm stirring again. Not infatuation, not longing, but quiet hope. It wasn't about love reborn or fate rewritten. It was about balance, about rediscovering the man he'd always been before life tried to break him. As the last light faded behind the horizon, Ryan leaned back, breathing in the cool air. The lies that once shattered him no longer had power. The memories that once hurt now simply existed, like old scars that no longer ached. And there, in that house that had once been the stage of his deepest pain, Ryan found something no one could ever take away again. Peace that stayed. Months rolled into years, and Ryan's name slowly became one whispered with quiet respect in his community. People admired him not for his success, but for his calm resilience. He had been to the depths of betrayal and somehow climbed out without bitterness. He wasn't the man he once was, not the naive husband, nor the broken father. He had become something deeper, a man rebuilt by truth. At work, his colleagues noticed the change. The man who once wore quiet exhaustion now carried a quiet certainty. He smiled more, not because life was perfect, but because he no longer pretended it had to be. Every now and then, when he passed by families at the park, parents pushing strollers, children chasing bubbles, a small ache would stir in his chest. It wasn't pain exactly. It was memory, the echo of a life that could have been. But even that, he had made peace with. He knew now that love isn't always honest, and truth doesn't always come wrapped in kindness. Sometimes it comes sharp and brutal, but it's still the only thing strong enough to set a person free. One Sunday morning, Ryan was invited to speak at a community gathering about resilience after betrayal. He almost declined, but something inside him urged him to share. Standing before the small crowd, he didn't tell them every detail. No names, no scandal, no bitterness. He simply said, "Once, I thought a lie was easier to live with than the truth. I was wrong. Lies rot you from the inside out, until even your happiness starts to smell like fear. But the truth, it hurts once, and then it heals." The room fell into a still silence. Some nodded, some teared up, and one woman whispered, "That's the truth." When he finished, an elderly man approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've turned pain into wisdom, son. That's something not everyone can do." That night, as Ryan drove home, the city lights stretched before him like constellations of new beginnings. He realized that peace isn't about forgetting the people who hurt you. It's about remembering yourself after they're gone. He parked his car, stepped inside his home, and walked past the garden. The flowers had bloomed again, full and vivid, dancing gently in the evening breeze. He paused, smiling faintly. No ghost of Melissa lingered there. No shadow of deceit remained. Only truth, growing quietly in the soil he once turned in pain. Ryan looked up at the night sky and whispered a few words meant only for himself. A home built on lies will crumble under the weight of truth, but a man who stands in that truth will never fall again. And in that simple moment, under the hum of streetlights and the scent of earth, Ryan understood that this was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of peace.